All right, we are now in Esther chapter 7. Now, Esther chapter 7 is the key chapter. Okay, it is the key chapter. Uh, Everything changes from this chapter. We see the build up, and in chapter 6, we saw how the king was so so open and so gracious to Queen Esther, willing to give her even half the kingdom, continually impress on her to tell the king what she wanted. But in all these incidents recorded in chapter 6, we saw that Esther never asked the king a single thing and said, wait. And so she put up two dinners. So the first banquet happened, and after the first banquet, Haman was angry with Mordecai, went to erect a gallows that is about 70 over feet tall, basically wanting to make Mordecai a public spectacle. And the story continues in chapter 7. This is the time of the second banquet. And this second banquet starts in chapter 7, verse 1. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And you can tell that this is just the three of them, with just the king and Haman, because Haman is the most trusted prince. Now, unfortunately, in the entire discussion at the end of chapter 6, we found that Haman wanted to hang Mordecai and ask the king for the permission, but before he could do that, the king asked him his opinion how to reward this person, and that story is in chapter 6, and the end of the story was Haman was completely embarrassed and ashamed. And so he was so angry, he had to construct the gallows. He really wanted to kill Mordecai. And then suddenly he was asked to attend this banquet. So now we are in chapter 7. This is a banquet between Haman and the king and with Queen Esther. This is the second day, which is the second banquet. And we have seen that these banquets are all about drinking, a lot of drinking, a lot of wine. And the king once again said to Esther, what is your petition? What is your request? Right? Because the king knows one thing. The Queen Esther would not come to see him if she never had anything urgent. And even at this point in time, he has not understood why Queen Esther did what she has done. And so the king assured her, it shall be granted to you. And the assurance is, whatever you ask, even half the kingdom, it shall be done. Now, this is very important. This assurance of Queen Esther is, whatever you say is not a problem. And now comes the highlight of chapter 7. Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor in your sight, O king. And so remember, once again, favor is grace. You find grace in the eyes of the one who is more powerful, that who can extend grace. And so if it pleases my king, it's the same. Find favor is about pleasing the king, right? It is favor. So the favor now as is asked is this. This is the statement. Let my life be given me at my petition. Give me back my life. And also my people's life, as I am going to make my request. The request is this. So let me underline this. Give me my petition. It is to let me have my life. Okay? Same with my people's life. The discussion is this, for we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed Destroy means what? The word destroy here basically means to kill, to exterminate. Means it's very much like exterminating pests like that, right? To make them no more. Like that's basically how it says. To be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. And this one means uh, to be put to death, right? To be put to death, uh, to, how should I say, uh, to be blot out. So you see, all these three words are very close in meaning. To kill until no more, to be killed, and to be blotted out. All these three has similar meanings, but three different Hebrew words. And then she says, had we have been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue. I wouldn't say anything. Although the enemy would never compensate for the king's loss, because all these people belongs to the king. Now, after this petition was made, so we need to understand, the petition is very specific. First, grace and please the king. This is about life of my people and I. And then it says, we have been sold. Now, this idea of sold comes in the idea of somebody has sold them, right? You are not selling yourself, but somebody is selling you. And it's to be exterminated, killed, and blotted out. The whole effect of these few words is that the people and Esther will be no more on the face of the earth. This is a very serious situation. It reminds us today of what the Nazis and Hitler did to the Jewish people, to kill all of them. And this one is to be done at one go. Now, the interesting thing is, Esther came back and said, you know, if we have been sold as slaves, that would have been okay. But then again, of course, your king would have lost everything. And so we see in verse 5. Verse 5 says this, King Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? See, two things, who and where. Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? What does it mean, presume in his heart? It means that they are trying to be full. Okay, presume in his heart means be full in heart. This is an idiom as well, meaning you have all the ideas, all the plans to do such a thing, and this is considered wicked. And so that is what the king is angry. Who will dare do this? This is so incredible. And why would he even dare to do such a thing? So the idea here is to do and not just think about it, and this is the action. And so King Ahasuerus understood what Queen Esther said. It is not about wanting to exterminate, but the action has gone out as a decree. Now, the seriousness has come to the attention of the king, and verse 16, Queen Esther said, this adversary, this one who persecute, right? Persecute. You need to understand that the word persecute in this context is to press against each other. It's like the walls coming together, right? This is the adversary. And then he uses another word called enemy, to be hostile, right? to be hostile. This two things that he is doing is wicked Haman. And that is a very important thing to say. This is evil. Evil Haman. This one is evil. So remember, evil doesn't actually only mean moral bad. It means anything that is not according to what God wants to do. That is evil. So don't think of evil, again, I mentioned, don't think of evil as only moral bad. Anything that is against God's good intentions is considered evil. And what is against God's good intention here? To persecute and to be an enemy, to kill and exterminate God's people. And so he is called wicked Haman in this case, right? After these words are said, Haman is said to be terrified. This word here, terrified, it means to be very afraid. Afraid, right? Very, very afraid. Before the king, and actually more the king than the queen. But because the king has a power to destroy, the queen was the one who laid the charge against Haman, which means that the king and the queen is now together as one. And so Haman by himself will never be able to get out of this. This was also, if you remember, the prediction of the wife and the friends in chapter 6. And so now in verse 7, the king stood up in his wrath. He was so angry. And he went into the palace garden. Now you notice, what is the intent? Is to cool down a bit, right? To cool down, to think about this. Why is it so important to think about it? Because Haman is the one he has promoted. Haman is the one that he has trusted. Haman is the one that he has preferred over all the other officials. And now, if this is true, then the king has been cheated. And the king is so angry. And that's the word, angry. Now, after the king has gone out, this next scene is important. The next scene is this. Haman stood before the Queen Esther, pleading for his life. Pleading for his life is a very interesting phrase. This word pleading is to seek. It's like asking for his life back. He knows that he's a dead man right now because the queen has accused him and the king has heard it. The king was so angry he left. He is now asking for his life. That is what pleading here means. So the Hebrew is about seeking his life, looking for his life back, right? For he saw that evil. Now notice this word evil again. Same word. Same word. Here. All right. Exactly the same word. It's said to be wicked. Now it's said to be evil. Both are the same word. Why is it evil against him as determined by the king? The king made up his mind that there's evil to Haman. Why you call it evil? It is what is not right in the eyes of Haman. That is not what Haman wants, so Haman sees it as evil. Okay, that's how we look at it. Esther looks at Haman as evil. Why? Because Haman is doing something that is not the intent of Esther. So when you look at these words, evil, good and evil, it needs a context. It doesn't always have to be God in the context. So the context here in verse 6 is about Esther. So from the eyes of Esther, Haman is wicked because he's doing things that is against her intentions. Now, in verse 7, right here, and Haman sees what the king decides is evil because it's in the eyes of Haman. The king is going to make decisions that is not in the intent of Haman. So you can see that these words, wicked or evil, is about how the person who describes it frames the expression evil. Now that you can see one is from Esther, one is from Haman, we can see now in verse 8. In verse 8, the king came back from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of the wine. And then Haman had fallen across the couch. Now, this is a very interesting thing. Fall literally is to fall, you know. This is to fall. He fall upon the couch. So if this was the chair, Haman would be doing this. The queen is here. Haman himself would have done this. Haman would have fallen over it, begging the queen for his life. And so this is also what we call an intimate scene. And if you recall, intimate scenes with the queen is not viewed in good intent of the king. The king would be very angry if anybody touches the queen. The queen belongs to the king. So you know those cultures, those days, you don't touch another person's wife. And the queen is the king's wife. And so the moment the king came back, he saw where Haman was, and he fell over that couch. And so that is a very serious affair. Very, very serious affair. Couch is actually, how should we say? The word couch is like a little bed. And those days, people don't sit on just a little chair. They sit on a couch where you could actually sit or you lie on or you can sleep on it. And it's that big. And you find that Haman was over that couch. And so the impression to the king is, what are you doing, Haman? And so the king was thinking, is Haman trying to assault the queen? And the word assault here is to kidnap or attack, violate. Hey, you see all these words? They're not very nice words, right? To overpower. You see these words for the word assault? Not very good words. And you can tell that if these are the meaning of the word assault, what is going on in the king's mind when he was in a position that the king could conclude that he was attacking the queen, he was trying to kidnap the queen, he was trying to violate the queen, he was trying to overpower the queen. When I am in the house, he is still in the palace, and yet Haman dare do that. And now the story ends right here. As the word left the king's mouth, you can see how the Hebrew expresses this. This is very, very important. This is to go out. As the word left the king's mouth. You remember the Hebrew language is meant to be heard. And as what is said to what they hear, they actually can imagine what is happening. So when we are the audience of this particular chapter 7 of Esther, and you hear these words, The moment the words left the king's mouth, immediately it was taken into action. The officials covered Haman's face. It's like the terrorists trying to kidnap you. You put a cloth over your head. And this is important because this is a form of an arrest. This is the king calling him to be arrested. Now your head is covered. There will be a judgment. Verse 9. Now Harbona, one of the officials, said to the king, "Look, the gallows." Remember what the gallows is? The gallows is like a tree. It is straight up, right? And then there's one little noose coming here. And this gallows was at least 70 feet high. He says, "Look at this. The gallows is 50 cubits high. Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf." What is spoke good on the king's behalf? Remember what Mordecai did? Mordecai informed the king via Esther of a coup of these two guards at the king's gate who wanted to attack and kill the king. And so Mordecai was rewarded in chapter 6. And this is the Mordecai that Haman wants to hang. It is now standing at Haman's house. The king immediately said this, "Hang him on it." Verse 9. Hang him on it. Now the intent of hanging, the word hang is to suspend. And this would be by the neck. And he would be made a spectacle in all of Shushan, that he would be the one hung in his own home. Conclusion of verse 10, they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Only then, after he died, the king's wrath subsided. Why was the king so angry? One, he was trying to undermine the king, trying to get rid of a people that belongs to the king and the king loved. Number two, he was angry because of the position he was found with Esther, that it seems that he was going to attack Esther as well. Then you think that Esther is one that the king loved, and he was ultra angry. And after he died, after Haman was hanged, the king's anger subsided. What is subsided? Go down. And these expressions are very oriental, actually. When you're angry, it goes up. When you are no longer angry, it goes down. It's very Chinese as well, right? It expresses itself in a very vivid, a very action-oriented idea. So that when you hear the words, you can see the anger coming up, and then you can see the anger coming down. And that is what subside actually means. These are English words for very simple expressions. And this would be the key of the book of Esther. And it's a very short chapter, only 10 verses. But it gives us the meaning why this was done. Very much because Esther found favor in the eyes of the king. And she pleased the king. Haman did not. In fact, did things which made the king angry. So we can always see these things. And in conclusion, one, favor in eyes of king. And this is Esther. It pleases the king. Number two was Haman. What did he find in the eyes of the king? Wrath in eyes of king. That's why he was pleading for his life. But the king did not give him grace. In fact, gave him death. And this is the judgment. So you see, everything lies in the eyes of the one in authority. One is wrath, one is favor. In this case, grace. And so the Old Testament, even in the New Testament, gives us this idea of grace. Because Esther had grace in the eyes of the king. Because Esther pleases the king. Everything she asked was given. Because Haman upset the king. Because Haman made the king angry that his wrath went up. He only received death because of that anger response. And so these are two things that we learn in chapter 7. Grace is that important. Grace is that important. But notice, grace is not arbitrary. Grace is really in the eyes of the beholder, of the eyes of the one who gives grace and gives favor. First, you must obtain that grace and favor in his eyes to please him first. And so I've kept repeating this idea of grace because we tend to think that grace is like a pill. I ask grace from God. If you do not please God, you have no grace. If Esther does not please the king, she has no grace. Haman did not please the king. He had anger and wrath. So he was terrified for his life. And with this, we end chapter 7. Any questions?
Esther seems to be very smart. Got a lot of wisdom when she plans for the 2 banquets, which I think ordinary woman will not be able to do unless you really think far and think very deep.
I think you are having a very good observation. Esther is not a stupid queen.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. She is very courageous. She fixed her mind of doing something and she is doing it even if it means her life. And she is not simply doing it, she has planned it out. And so she's a very wise and shrewd actions that came from her. Yes, absolutely. Good observation.
That must be one of the things that the king saw in her.
Maybe. Not only that she is beautiful, but she managed to get grace, find grace in his eyes. That's why she became the queen and not others.
Not
so she knows how to say
the
things,
face.
right? Correct. Yeah, I see the Bible in Book of Esther doesn't talk about God and Jehovah, but you can see that is what's behind it. One of the things that you also know why Mordecai was so prominent is that it is likely that Mordecai was the leader of the Jews. Right? So he is very wise as well. He knows what to do. And so until he has no other plans, Esther was put in motion and Esther was willing to bite the bullet. So very bold, very courageous, but very willing to do and die for the people. So this is a very patriotic book.
When the people were asked to fast for the 3 days, they actually, the Bible never mentioned prayer.
Right.
But it must have involved prayer.
Yes,
only thing
I
is
think
not
so too.
mentioned. And God must be actually part of it, but only thing is not mentioned. Otherwise, fast for what?
I think so too. I think so too. Idea is behind the scene you can see them relating to God. I think that's what we can see. But it is, like I said, it's all an inference. It is not from the text, but we can tell that these people would be very God conscious.
Yeah. Agreed.
I mean, they have come to the stage that nobody else can help them.
Yep.
So I'm sure they actually pray for the 3 days of fasting.
To seek God. Yep.
That will
And
be the only
interestingly, you
help
can
they
see
can get.
Esther is representing all the Jews.
Mm.
So who says women have no place? So Esther is a very crucial figure in the book of Esther. And the fact that it's in the Bible itself shows us, like Ruth, a primary focus in the woman character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll continue tomorrow.
Thank
Bye. Thanks, Pastor.